going through the interview process. She is the newest faculty member of the transportation group, and we are honored to now have her at TAC. To give her a little bit of background, she comes to us from UC Davis, where she was a professor emeritus, served as the associate director of the Institute of Transportation Studies, and was founding chair of the interdisciplinary MS-PhD program in transportation technology and policy. Prior to joining the UC Davis faculty, she worked for several years in regional planning and consulting in Southern California. She has specialized in the study of travel behavior for more than 30 years. Her key research interests include the impacts of land use on travel behavior, the impact of telecommunications technology on travel behavior, commuters' response to congestion or to system disruptions, attitudes towards mobility, and travel multitasking. She's directed or participated in several dozen projects relating to these areas, involving funding totaling about $8 million, and she has authored or co-authored more than 200 refereed journal publications, technical reports, and other publications. And I can tell you, having served on the committee that reviewed everything, Pat is actually listed as one of the top 25 cited authors on Google Scholar in our field. So with that, Dr. Pat Moktharian.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really delighted to be at Georgia Tech in Atlanta after 23 years at UC Davis and 30-some years in California. I'm coming back to my roots. I grew up in the South, and I'll tell you in a moment. I want to thank everyone who's here today, especially those who came from off campus. I know you all have other things to do with your time, and I'm honored that you chose to spend it here. Why do I specialize in travel behavior? Well, I think the main reason is that I feel that it's important for us to understand people's behavior, why they do what they do. It's important for a number of reasons. First of all, a lot of what we do in transportation planning is try to forecast the demand in the future, and so in order to do that, it stands to reason that we want to know something about behavior to start with and why people do what they do. We're also interested many times in evaluating the effectiveness of policies, whether before the fact, i.e., what would happen if we implemented the following policy, or even perhaps after the fact, how well did such and such work, or how well is it working. We often are faced with new technologies, communication technologies being a set that's important to me and to all of us, but transportation technologies as well. So what will happen to transportation with driverless cars? We'll talk about that later briefly. What has happened with the introduction of information communication technologies? Has it substituted for travel? And so forth. And last but not least, I think understanding travel behavior might sometimes help us avoid some unintended consequences of policies that are well meant, but perhaps fail to take into account behavior and some of the sneaky ways that people can get around policies. So just a little bit more about my background. Only a few years ago did I realize that I'm actually the very logical product of my two parents. My father flew helicopters for a living, so I got from him the love of travel, I think, and interest in transportation. My mother went for a PhD when I was in high school and became a marriage and family therapist, so I think I got from her my interest in behavior and understanding what makes people tick. So here I am. I don't know where the math came from, except that neither of my parents are that mathy, but I do have an uncle who also got his PhD in math from Florida State, so must have skipped a generation when it came to my mother. But anyway, I've always been interested in quantitative methods and applying them to something interesting and important to society. So that's why I chose to do my master's and PhD in operations research. It was applied math, and so I wanted to you an idea of the kinds of tools that I generally use. First of all, I do study use quantitative methods to study travel behavior. I admire people who do qualitative research, but it's really hard to do it well. But I tend to specialize in collecting quantity of data that I can then analyze with mathematics. So in particular, I'm often designing my own surveys because I'm usually not finding the data that I want in surveys that are out there already. And I've specialized over the years in measuring attitudes. It was a big revelation to me when I realized that you could actually put a number to somebody's attitude and compare the intensity of their attitude to somebody else's and use those measurements as explanatory variables in models of behavior. So I've been doing that in one form or another ever since my graduate school days. And then using techniques like regression and speech-based modeling to use these attitudes and other demographics, other variables as explanatory variables of behavior. I've also used structural equation models. If you're familiar with regression or discrete choice, it's usually one equation at a time, but a lot of times we have multiple directions of causality going on at the same time. So, for example, yes, attitudes influence behavior, that stands to reason, but occasionally behavior influences attitudes as well, right? So when we do something, maybe not something consistent with our previous attitudes, but if we do it often enough, maybe our attitudes fall into line with what we're forced to do for other reasons. Or looking at telecommunications and travel behavior, it's been clear to me for a long time that they each influence the other. So only looking at one equation and showing only one direction of causality is bound to give you a complete picture. Another thing that I love to look at is population heterogeneity, and by that I mean different strokes for different folks, right? So more technically, it means that coefficients in a regression or discrete choice model might differ for different groups of people in a population. That is, different groups of people consider different factors to be important in their decision making. Much stronger, much more important for one group than for another. They're trying to tease out that heterogeneity in the population. So now I want to turn to specific topics that I've spent a lot of time on in my career, and this is where it was hard for me, and in fact impossible, to keep the talk to 30 minutes. So I want to talk about 4 areas. Actually, I'm going to skip letter C entirely because that was the subject of my interview talk, so I don't know all who were here last year, but I will, in the interest of time, pass over that one and focus on the 3 others that are on the screen here. But my penance for going over 30 minutes is that I will try to stop at the end of each topic and ask questions then, so I won't go all the way through without giving you a chance to interact. And in fact, feel free to stop me anytime you like. So the first topic I want to talk about is why do people travel? You can't get much more fundamental than that, right? So why do people travel? Well, for many people in transportation, it's like asking why, the silly children's riddle, why did the chicken cross the road? The answer being, right? And hundreds of variations on that, which has to talk in itself. But, the answer is duh, to get to where people want to be, that's how they travel. So from that observation, we get to conclusion that travel is a derived demand, meaning that you don't travel just for the heck of traveling, it's derived from the demand to be somewhere other than you are, to do something that you want to do. And along with that, sure people will, go to the nearest store instead of driving across town. Or, again, a subject I've spent a lot of time on, and all we need to do is provide information communication technology alternatives to travel. And then people will obviously take advantage of it and tell people well, all of that would be very well and good if indeed that were the only reason people travel, to get somewhere in particular. But we can imagine lots of other reasons why they might travel, even for its own sake. That travel is intrinsically desirable. So if I had more time, I'd get you the reasons to some of these notes like that. But you can read more quickly than I can talk. And this is intended then to just give you a flavor of here's why people might travel even when they don't have to. And I took out some slides in the interest of time, but again, think about those of you who have a 4-step process, trip generation, destination, mode choice, route choice. Every single one of those steps, when you think about some of these reasons, could lead you to travel more than necessary, to take trips that weren't necessary, to take routes that were longer than necessary, and so on, destinations that were farther than necessary. So our assertion then about this idea is that those characteristics, which most people didn't have any trouble imagining that they could apply to leisure travel. Okay, escape, yeah, exercise, sure. But our suggestion is that they apply not only to recreational or leisure travel, but also to our ordinary everyday travel that we do. Now, okay, perhaps varying by person, by circumstance, by mood, etc. But still, all of us, to some extent, need to get out, need to travel, need to move. And my other revelation was that at first I was thinking, well, okay, this is probably still just middling at the margin, and we're only talking about a tiny fraction of total travel that would be considered excess. But then it dawned on me that, well, even if I'm traveling for a derived purpose, my travel may simultaneously be fulfilling the need to travel for its own sake as well. And so that makes it really hard to separate out the two, how much of travel is purely excess. Well, purely excess may be the wrong question. It's really, if you could get by without making this trip, which you are doing for a derived demand reason, like commuting, would you eliminate that trip if you could? And so that's why we see in cases like telecommuting, not as many people telecommute as could, whose jobs permit it. And I think in part because the commute is fulfilling a positive function for them above and beyond getting them to work. And so even though they could eliminate the commute, they choose not to. So that sort of brought me to the idea that travel, then, the utility of travel, I guess, you could divide into 3 components. The first one is the derived demand component that we're all familiar with. That is the utility of activities conducted at the destination is what prompts me to make that trip and to overcome the disutility of the travel itself, so to speak. But the activity of traveling itself, as I've been trying to suggest, also has part to play, the utility of travel. And then in between those, what happened? In between those, we have activities conducted while traveling, which I suggest also contributes to the utility of travel. And so again, you can imagine all the things people are doing while traveling these days, and I'll come back and talk to about this later as one of my other topics of current interest. So we did look at this empirically, and there are, again, tons of papers, tons of problems, etc. From this data, so I don't have time to go into details now, but just a couple of headlines, I guess you could say. We asked people on the survey that we did for this, all things considered, and we prefaced it with a series of attitudinal statements that showed good things about travel and bad things about travel. And then we said, okay, for you, what would be your ideal commute time? And if travel is indeed this utility, we were asking a hypothetical question, so you'd think everybody would say 0, right? I don't want to commute at all. I just snap my fingers and get to where I'm going. But we didn't find that it was always 0, and thinking of those 3 parts to the utility of travel, these correspond to each of those 3 parts. In terms of the utility of the activity of the destination, maybe there are fun things to do at the work location. I work in a downtown high-rise, and there's lots of activities nearby that I want to go to during my lunch hour, and so that's a lot more fun than staying at home in a studio apartment and the walls closing in. Or maybe the commute itself, so the activity maybe not when you think about the function that the commute can play in our transitioning between realms of our lives. So another just quick sort of descriptive statistics results from the sample is we ask people straight out, how much do you like traveling on a 5-point scale from strongly disliked to strongly liked, but we can collapse the strongly disliked and disliked for convenience of presentation, and same for the like and strongly like. So we see here that, as you might expect, people like long distance travel more than short distance travel, but levels of dislike are actually pretty similar for both, and pretty low. 11 to 13% of the sample disliked either of those forms of travel, but lots of people were just fine with their short distance travel, didn't really dislike it, and even in terms of short distance travel, something like 31 or 32% actively liked their short distance travel. And we have it by purpose too. This is just the short distance purposes. But if you look at the dislike, then clearly the commute sticks out. So yes, not surprisingly, the commute trip is the most disliked purpose in the sample. But my goodness, even 18% or so of the sample actively liked their commute, and a good 40% were again just fine with it. They didn't dislike it. And just to kind of jump quickly to a whole different study, but one of the criticisms that you could make about this study was that it's a fairly small sample that wasn't pretending to be completely representative of the population, and even if it were, it's only Northern California or the San Francisco Bay Area. So how can you generalize from that? Well, I was happy when the French actually incorporated some questions into their national travel survey, which allowed us to look at this question for a large, geographically stratified, representatively weighted national sample. And it's basically based on a random trip that was selected for each household. A random person in the household was asked about a random trip that was 10 minutes or longer. And in particular, they were asked how pleasant the trip was. This is really a crosstab that I stole from another talk quickly and didn't want you to think about the other dimension. So really all we care about are the 3 categories that they can reply to the question of how pleasant this randomly selected trip was. And what's clear is that most trips are not unpleasant. So about half the trips were neither pleasant or unpleasant, but a good 46% were actually pleasant, and only 3.6 or 4% were unpleasant. So again, a random sample of trips, basically, at least for France. The vast majority of them are not at all unpleasant. So again, it suggests to me that there's something more going on to travel, about travel, than just we need to get to where we're going. Some questions I have about the subject are, again, if we are talking about kind of purely excess travel, travel that didn't need to happen at all, but happens for its own sake, if you will, how much are we talking about? Is it negligible? Is it something that, even 5% is something we'd be interested in as transportation planners. We spend billions of dollars trying to reduce DOT by less than that, right? But one person's excess travel is another person's necessity, so you get into value judgments there, and I think that's also an interesting discussion to have as a society, and especially when you think about what do we do about excess travel if it exists. Do we try to squish it out? And if so, what are we doing to the quality of life when we do that? Maybe we can convince
what's your ideal time for commuting? Did you know, was any of that biased based on what people's existing commuting time was? So like if I have an hour commute, ideal is 30 minutes, but I have a 10-minute commute now, my ideal is about 10 minutes. You know?
Right.
Does that change what I'd be willing to say is ideal?
So bias, I don't know, but there was definitely a relationship to their actual commute time, which, by the way, we didn't ask till all the way to the end of the survey, trying not to get them to tie it too closely with what their actual time was. But it does stand to reason that those who had longer commutes, their ideal times were shorter than their actual commute time. So for the ones whose ideal commute times were in the order of 16 minutes or so, those were the people that tended to have shorter commutes even than that. And so the point was it was possible to not be commuting long enough. And so, but again, relative to what they were doing. People also asked us later, well, what if the respondents didn't realize that 0 was a legitimate answer, because it is kind of odd, I guess. And so we actually had the opportunity to do some focus groups after collecting the survey data, and were able to kind of explore that. And some people said, well, yeah, I didn't realize it was a legitimate answer, but I wouldn't have said it even if I did. Others said, oh, well, no, I knew it was a legitimate answer because I work at home now, and actually I don't like it as much because I need to get out, et cetera, et cetera. So we came away from that, small focus group being convinced that, the results were pretty robust to that issue.
Yeah, I was wondering, given all this, that people are actually enjoying their travel, at least up to a certain point, would you say that this kind of absolute metric of saved travel time to measure the benefits of transportation improvements is inappropriate, or should be replaced with something else?
Let's put it this way, I think it's flawed. And, I'm not the only one saying this, lots of people are kind of understanding that. And even before this issue, there was, controversy over, does it really make sense to monetize fractions of a minute? So you're basically, a lot of these calculations are based on, okay, this kind of trip will save 35 seconds, but there's millions of those, so times millions equals lots of dollars, and so many dollars per minute. And, do people really even perceive travel time savings of that amount, and does it really make sense to put a dollar value on that? So there's a whole lot of issues of, the monetization of travel time savings, including this one, but it's all beyond that. So, and some people are looking at it. I don't know that there's a big movement afoot to change it because it is sort of embedded, and what do you replace it with? But yeah, I think it's a challenge.
In the travel satisfaction, was there a difference depending on the travel mode, so that people walking or people driving a car would be more satisfied or less?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't show the slide for our data here in Northern California, where we looked at the travel liking by mode, for example. And sorry, Carrie, but bus was the least liked mode. But that's San Francisco, I'm sure it's different. But yeah, so there's that, and then the French data too. We certainly found mode effects when we were modeling Pleasant House. So pretty much along the lines of what you would expect, bikers and walkers. I think it's very pleasant. But again, since those are relatively small fractions of the total, then it's not really what's striking. Okay, can I go to another topic? Because this one's fun too. What are the impacts of information and communication technology while traveling? This was really, I guess, how my career got started in academia, because I was working on this even while working at the Southern California Association of Governments before rejoining academia. So the issue is, everybody, once ICT came along, modern ICTs in particular, including even back to the telephone, it seemed clear that it had the potential to substitute for trips. And so the question to me is, well, I'm the one coming in and saying, well, you know, ICT isn't that green when it comes to travel because it'll actually generate more travel than it replaces. So I had 5 minutes of the Google thing. I don't know if I can keep it with 5 minutes now, but the next 4 slides give the top 4 reasons, in my view, why the internet will increase travel. And they all have kind of this format where we talk about equality that the internet or ICT more generally has, the implication of that, and then the travel impact of that implication. So, and again, embedded in all of this is lots of research and papers and stuff, so I find that a lot of articles too. So, reason number 4 is that the internet saves time and money, and what are you going to do with those things that you save? You're going to apply them to other activities. Some of them will involve travel, and some of them will actually be travel. So when you think about the internet, how cheap it makes travel and how easy it is to find out about travel bargains and so forth, it's not very hard to imagine that travel will increase. There's more trips with the same kind of hotwire, right? A big one for me is the increased productivity or enjoyment of travel time. So that's that second aspect of the utility of travel that we talked about before, the activities conducted while traveling, and I'll come back to that later too as my third topic. So, you know, the more ways I can redeem the time I spend traveling, the less of a disutility it is to me, and therefore the less need I have to minimize it because it's, you know, up to a point again, almost as good as sitting at home in the comfort of my easy chair if I can do all the things that I would be doing at home in the comfort of my easy chair. So again, it makes me less interested in responding to policies that are trying to get me to reduce travel margin, which is trying to generate new trips. So, you know, it can have the benign effect of making me more willing to take transit even though it's longer, a longer trip than driving. But it can have the less benign effect of, you know, the more cars become automated and take on those same qualities of hands-free travel that transit currently has. Imagine what's going to happen to travel when I can just sit in my car, have all my point-to-point value of being in a car, and not have to waste the time, if you will. I'll come back to that point again as well. Number 2 reason is, you know, all the ITS things, the Intelligent Transportation System things, and acronyms that are point long. All of them have the effect of increasing the effective capacity of the systems, right? And that means that makes travel effectively cheaper, and economics says that you reduce the cost and the demand increases. So it seems to me the more we succeed at what we're trying to do with all these ITS technologies, the more travel we're likely to see possible. And then this is the messiest or most complicated slide with the pretty pictures because these are longer term indirect impacts. So they, I think, are harder to grasp readily, but maybe the single biggest set of reasons why the internet and ICT in general are increasing travel. So just the ability to convey information about people, places, activities, and so on that then inspires you to want to go visit and see is astounding. And on the business side, the globalization of commerce has all kinds of implications for generating more travel. So that's it in a nutshell for that topic. Again, lots of stuff under the surface there. I'd be happy to talk about it further. So any questions?
I guess these are reasons that it may be increasing travel, but this is more of all-day sort of travel and longer distance travel in many cases, rather than sort of this peak hour that we're generally very concerned about. So I wonder if you could comment on
Good
that.
question, good question. Yeah, so the fine print is, I've also studied telecommuting specifically a lot, and I am convinced that telecommuting per se is a net benefit, i.e. net reduction in travel. And we looked at it every way we could, because you can imagine hypotheses which is bad for travel. Maybe people will, you know, drop out of their carpools if they're only commuting 1 day a week instead, you know, so increases driving alone on the days that they do commute. Or maybe it'll generate more non-work trips because the time they save by not having to commute, they'll just use up all that time traveling for other things. Or maybe they'll live farther away from work now that they only have to go in 1 day a week or once a month. So maybe they'll generate more VMT on the fewer commute trips that they make in a positive situation. So we looked at all those things the best we could. Now some of them need more work, but as far as we can tell, the answers are straight and all cases. otherwise what would I have been doing, you know? Yeah, there are some effects in the other direction as well, but again, looking at the aggregate statistics, it seems in general that the net effect is positive. Other questions? Great. So this one, I'm just gonna let you look at for a minute. Again, I did this in my interview talk, which I cannot believe is almost a year ago. So, short story here, but it's a fascinating question that I'm still interested in pursuing, and as a PhD student is working on it as we speak. So again, the question of what has the biggest impact on travel behavior, the built environment itself, or the attitudinal predisposition that led me to locate in that particular built environment in the first place? Short answer is both, and but you know, I think there are some implications that if we don't look at the role of attitudes, we're going to be overestimating the impact of the built environment, and therefore our policies might not have the as complete an effect program work when we're trying to densify the built environment and so on. Any questions about that? Okay, so let's talk about the last thing on my list of things that I'm currently active in, although there's others that I'm pulling out and time. But so this one is quite interesting to me. It obviously has roots in these earlier topics that we've been talking about. So what are the implications of what we call travel-based multitasking, specifically activities that people do while traveling? So multitasking is a hallmark of modern life. AT&T tries to convince us that, of course, two things. It's not complicated. Doing two things at once. But it's a mixed blessing, right? So, you know, I tried to make a busy slide here to illustrate how distracted we are and fractured our life is. And this is the Thanksgiving dinner table now with everybody sitting around and texting. Except for the turkey, this reminds me of some of my research meetings now. Lost to these students. Many times they're working on stuff related to our project, but probably they're checking their emails. So again, we've covered this, that travel is a disutility, and we assume people are going to choose the fastest means of travel or the shortest way to get there. So what will the ability to do more and more things while traveling do to that again, concept of travel as a disutility? Well, when I first started telling people I was interested in the subject and what people do while traveling, they immediately asked, oh, you mean distracted driving? And that is kind of a logical thing to think about, but that's not all I'm interested in, although if I were, this would be the perfect cartoon. The bumper sticker says, honk if you love Jesus, text while driving if you like to eat. That's distracted driving in a nutshell. But in addition to that, so I'm not uninterested in that, but in addition I have these kinds of questions. Why do we multitask? And when I stop to think about it, I think there's a lot of different reasons that could have different implications for later choices, behaviors, and so forth. So is it that I'm decreasing the burden of an activity I don't like, as opposed to increasing the pleasure of an activity that I do like? Maybe those have the same outcome, but you know they are slightly different reasons, and I'd be interested to know when it's one versus the other. Maybe I need to do it to increase my productivity, or maybe it's just to decrease the time pressure. Maybe it's to decrease the stress, or maybe the increased stress is that some people say I need to feel like I've got too much to do in order to be productive, right? I need that stress. Maybe some students out there are like, I need to wait until the last minute to do the homework because that's what I'm going, right? And so sometimes we create the stress because that's what we need to do it, or it reinforces self-identity. I'm a busy person, I'm the kind of person who needs to be doing 5 things at once because that's just what cool should do. And so, or maybe again, just for its own sake, because I can. So those again are quite different motivations for multitasking. So maybe they manifest in different behaviors or different susceptibility to policies or that kind of thing. So I'm interested in that kind of question. Been through that before, and so again, what does the ability to multitask while traveling do to the use of travel time savings as the major benefit of proposed improvements? Does it make people less inclined to reduce their commuting distance? So again, if I can take a train ride and use that time productively, me, I can do a 45-minute transit ride with no transfers and waiting and all of that. I prefer that over half an hour and stopping no traffic in the car. However, again, that advantage of transits might only be a few more years in the making, as we will have our cars do the same. Food for thought, right? So again, will that reduce the inclination to pay for travel time savings, in which case, what will happen to this whole basis for information cost-benefit analyses? So we're nibbling at these topics. I can't say we're going to solve all these big questions here with one survey, but we did do a survey where we collected lots of data on attitudes and multitasking propensity and personality and sociodemographics and community behavior and activities conducted while commuting. And again, jumping to the headline at the moment, we're still very much in progress with analyzing this data. But we're doing mode choice models and trying to quantify, if you will, the incremental contribution of the ability to multitask to mode choice, in particular probably transit. But again, we see some impacts on driving alone, but for the most part, we're seeing that yes, the ability to use a laptop in particular at the moment is creating more transit ridership than what it is otherwise. So we're still trying to fine tune and be more confident of our actual numbers before we submit this paper for publication, but not alone, so if anybody's interested, discuss more. And there's a ton more things we can do with this data set, so if it's funding down the road, I will definitely be milking this for quite a while. I think that was it for that one. Yeah, so questions on that one? Yes.
It seems that the multitasking while traveling is part of the broader multitasking all the time. You just have to.
Yeah, so funny you should say that because I got fascinated just with multitasking in general, bless you. And so with my postdoc and a master's student, we wrote this conceptual paper on multitasking generically, so not having specifically to do with travel, but we had a section in the paper on travel. And so I'm totally fascinated by the subject in all of its breadth, because one of the things that struck me was how many different combinations of activities we would still call multitasking. So it's one thing to have music on in the background while I'm actively doing something else. It's another thing to be juggling while I'm riding a bicycle, and it's another thing to be doing something productive while I'm traveling, etc. So our conceptual paper, which is a 50-page paper published in its entirety, it's not an online journal, really an online journal to do that, but it's a very respectable online journal. Gives kind of a typology of multitasking and how you can characterize it on this dimension or that dimension and so forth. And then, to get funding to do this kind of work, I have to tie it to transportation. But one of the things I want to do is build in an SF grant on just multitasking more broadly, as you say, instead of part of the paper. Yes?
I have another
Yes.
general question. With regards to the household travel survey, many would argue that's sort of going away because of the ability to buy data, all the technology. How does that impact your desire to get more behavioral based data?
Well, that's just it. What will you get from commercially available data? You'll get lots of peripheral information about maybe the purchases, and so you can deduce something about lifestyle and so forth. Maybe you can even deduce something about attitudes. So yeah, I'm certainly interested in exploring kind of what you can do with that kind of data. My own bias till now has been you can only go so far with what you actually observe people doing, because that tells you what they do but not why they do it. And so to better understand why they do it is going to help you predict better what will happen if something changes. And in order to do that, there's no way around asking them so far. Hopefully we don't get to the mind reading stage in my lifetime, but at the moment, we have to ask people to tell us their attitudes and motivations, etc. And of course they'll lie or inadvertently biased in what they report to us, but still, what choice do we have in terms of getting inside their black box? So I like to think there's still room for both. New techniques that are certainly being embraced. Other thoughts on that? indicating that, you know, the PMT plots, if you look at them, have leveled off, maybe even dipped, come back a little, but still pretty level from the previous trends, that young people are delaying getting driver's licenses and buying cars and so forth. And so what does it all mean? So lots of speculations out there as to what the reasons are, not just the economy, because the trends predated the recession and all of that. So maybe it's partly changing attitudes, with youngsters are becoming more pro-environmental than their baby boomer, parents were, and more concerned about driving less. Maybe ICT is actually substituting for a lot of those trips and so on. The implications, if it's robust, are enormous, and from the standpoint of maybe we don't need as much infrastructure, or at least infrastructure maintenance costs may decline, fuel consumption will decline, on the manufacturing industry, what will happen to them? They're in trouble anyway, with Google, stupid story. So, again, deep questions, and so I think that's why there's so much interest in it, because the stakes are so high to understand what's going on. What would I do briefly? Again, need to give it some more thought, but several things that come to mind are, I think we need both aggregate methods and disaggregate methods. I would definitely try to do some more time series analysis with aggregate data, but maybe disaggregate it more by geographic area, and try to incorporate some variables that I haven't seen, at least in my the studies that I've looked at so far. And then do new data collection, and again, asking people sort of what's going on, because in some cases I think the answers might surprise us. So that's one topic. Any comments, thoughts on that? And then, as I mentioned, I would love to have a chance to take the regional household travel survey, and with just a few questions, so I'm not talking now. So, one thing I think that would be easy to do is to try to get a count, or a census, if you will, of the trips that are being made for their own sake. I think right now, most travel diaries don't do a good job of distinguishing between traveling to a recreational opportunity, so their purpose is recreation. What about travel as recreation? So I'm jogging in the park, that's a different category than jogging to the park, or traveling to the park. And then if I'm just in the park and reporting recreation, it's a big difference whether I'm just sitting there reading as opposed to jogging. And so I think just with a few more, and instructions to the respondent that stressing that your trip that you report might not have a destination, so that would help us get a recreational bike rides and walks around the block and so forth. So I think that wouldn't be too much additional effort. And then just adding one more trip purpose, right? Something along the lines of just because I needed to or wanted to would help us capture trips that, otherwise look destination oriented. What was the purpose of this trip? To get ice cream, okay, or eating, whatever. Well, that fails to point out that the real purpose for the trip was to get out of the house, and the ice cream was just the invented justification for getting out of the house. And so we try to stress that, just because I needed to or wanted to is a reasonable purpose for a trip, then we might be surprised at how many trips are made that way. And so, again, that's one sort of thing. And then, like the French did, take a random subset of activities. So obviously these kinds of questions would be very burdensome to ask about every single trip, but just take one for a given person and ask, could you have done this trip by not traveling? So again, a trip generation question. Could you have done it at a more close destination, or is this the closest place in which you could have satisfactorily done it? And did you reach it in a fast and practical way, trying to get at which route more circuitous than necessary? So, and I would love to be able to look at activities and classify them on this typology, if you will, taxonomy, where we have range, physical activity, and motion, low or high. So, I think each of these can be sort of motivations for activities or for movement. So in some cases it's the speed itself, but not the physical activity. So if I do car racing, then my physical activity is relatively low. I'm not sure if you're actually a race car driver, but compared to jogging or bicycling, you're probably expending fewer calories driving a race car, but you're speed is high, and your emotion is high, etc. So, I think just having kind of a taxonomy of these types of activities would help us better understand the need for speed, or the need for motion for its own sake, and wouldn't take too much out of it, I think. And then here's one of my favorites, apply the teleportation test. Again, just as a randomly selected subset of activities, simply ask if you could instantaneously teleport yourself to the destination, would you? And this really distinguishes those three types of utility for travel. If all I care about is getting to the destination, I would say absolutely teleport me to the destination. If I value the multitasking that I can do while I'm traveling, then maybe I'd say yes, maybe no, depending on how rushed I am or busy I am or whatever other contextual factors might come into play. But if I'm really doing it for the travel, then I would say no. So again, they're mostly going to be ones, right? Most of the time they say just be there as fast as possible. But if these are a non-trivial fraction, then I think we should know about it and start to try to learn better, what's going on there. So the teleportation question is obviously a fantasy one, and yet the idea is much more serious, and that is that it can help us understand what will happen with changes that do reduce the travel time, getting us closer to teleportation at least. And in the aggregate, when we've seen such changes in the past, increases in speeds or capacity, what we've noticed is that people don't seem to be reducing their travel, but seem to be filling it up with more travel. That's my last slide here. Basically, I don't quarrel with my engineering fellow colleagues who want to study vehicles and networks and all of that, but for me, what's interesting is the people who are making the decisions